This is Gemara Shavuos Daf Chof Dalid. I'm rolling on a Chof Gimel and Beis. We pulled up a drop short about 20 lines from the bottom, in which we quoted the end of the Mishnah, Shavua Shaloi Oichel V'chulu. And once again, we like all the learning to be an incredible schos refuah shalema for Tinok ben Miriam Ahuva b'soich sha'ar chayle Yisrael. So the Gemara starts with a classical kasha, ha gufa kasha. The Mishnah itself is one big sira. Amrit shvuah shlo yochel. First, the Mishnah says, what makes a shvuah I'm not going to eat? V'achal oichlin, shein ruyin lachila. V'shasem ashkin, shein ruyin lishtiyah. What's the halacha? Inedible, not fit for consumption. What's the halacha? Says the Mishnah. Potter. Potter Tani, but then the Mishnah learned. So when we read the Mishnah, we gave over perhaps the black and white partial chiluk, which is what? Which is one is inedible and one is edible. It's just, shkatzim, creepy crawlers. Nevela is not kosher. But now the Gemara hones in and the Gemara says, Ma'ishla Reisha de Pater, Ma'ishla Seifa de Chayiv. What's the chilek? One is Pater, one is Chayiv. Says the Gemara, Ha loi kasha. Reisha bistam, Seifa b'mefarish. The Reisha, as you already said, a stam shvua, I'm not going to eat. And therefore, not everything is included in the shvua. And therefore, since he said it's tam, therefore, that which is forbidden is not included in the shvua. Whereas sefer is b'mefarish, he included explicitly, I will not eat nevilos, etc. And therefore, everything is included. Ask the Gemara, mefarish nami, gufei tikshi. But if someone said mefarish, that itself is shver. Amai. What is the reason? Moshe Har Sinai. Why is he chayiv? He already was Moshe from Har Sinai. There's halacha. You're not allowed to eat in the veils of treifais. Who explains the Gemara? Rav Shmuel, Rav Yechel, and Damri. Bekoilal dvarim mutarim and dvarim asurim, where you included mutar and asur foods together. And the very shlakish amar. Excuse me. That's the first shot. Second shot is Vishlakish Amar. Yata Maitzi al Ibim Farish Chatzi Shir al Liba Derabon. Ibistam al Liba de Rebbe Akiva. One of these two shitas, the Amar, that says 4 lines from the bottom, under Meiser Atzoy Bekolshu, one can make even a kolshu, even the minutest amount, usher to himself. So two different shatim, all to explain that even though one is ostensibly Mushma Vaymin Mar Sinai, even though there is a halacha that you can eat nevelos utreifais, how we can still have a shvuah that will be chal. Says the Gemara. One second. I understand the first pshat. Why Rav Shmuel is like Rabbi Yechanan? Why they don't say like Rish Lakish? Explains the Gemara. Because they want to say the Mishnah fits with everyone. However, the obvious kasha, El Rish Lakish, my time Rav Yechanan. What did Rish Lakish say? Rish Lakish said it only works in Rabbi Akiva, or in Stam, or Mefarish with the Rabbanim Bechatzi Shir. But says the Gemara, so why doesn't Rish Lakish learn like Rabbi Yechanan? Amr L'cha Rish Lakish will respond, Ki Amrinan Isser Koilel. When do we say then we have a larger Isser, a more expansive Isser? It can take effect on top of a more specified Isser. When does that apply? As we turn over to Chavdal and Amar Aleph, Beis Rabami Love. As Rashi says, that's where we have a machlokes Rabbi Rabbanan v'Rav Shimon. Even though nevela is always aser, and ein iser chalal iser, which I'm sorry if I did not explain, that's the premise of the ganze sugya, that if your Moshe Vaimid Har Sinai already was aser, you can't have another iser bichal on top of it. Says the Gemara, you know why? The reason why it's chal on the last wide line in Rashi, the Yom Kippurim Isser Koilelhu, because Yom Kippurim is more expansive. Because before Yom Kippur, Asr have been Avela, but your mutter b'shchuta comes along Yom Kippur, and what's mutter, what's Asr? Everything. You can't eat any food. But that's an Isser Haba Me'elav. But Isser Haba Yidei Atzmai Lo Yamri None. When it's an Issa, one brings upon himself, as Rashi articulates in the 10 lines in our lines, Klaimar, Adi Adam Atzmai, which is an Isser Shvuah, that his Dibor, his words, come to make more things Aser, says the Gemara. Then the whole premise of Isser Koilel does not apply. Continues the Gemara, Bish, from the Reish Lakish. So now the Gemara asks, according to Reish Lakish, you said you're talking about we're making an Isser B'chol Shu. Shemachid is the reason Gapatar. Rabbi Shimon, they tell Rabbi Naimer Kol Shulamakis. V'lo Yaimer K'zayis El Carbon, that the shear of a K'zayis is only for a carbon. Elo the Rabbi Yechanan, my time the Rabbi Shimon the Patar. But according to Rabbi Yechanan, why according to Rabbi Shimon is the Patar? Midday, my time the Rabbi Shimon the Patar. According to Rabbi Yechanan, that says that we're talking about Isser Koilel in the Mishnah. Why according to Rabbi Shimon is he Patar? Explains the Gemara, Midei hu taima el misham Isser Koilel. Is the reason because of Isser Koilel? No, Rav Shimon letaimei. Rav Shimon is all the shita side. The lastly Isser Koilel. Titania, we learned in a brayso. Rabbi Shimon oimer oichan nevela b'yom kippurim patur. In nevela Yom Kippur, your patur for bringing a chatos. Why? This Yom Kippur is an Isser Koilel, is more inclusive. Still, you have an Isser Nevela. The Isser of Yom Kippur is not chal on top of it. So the Shita of Rav Shimon is even an Isser Abba Me'elov. There's no such thing. Says the Gemara, so bish, from the Reish Lakish, Mishkachas Labalav, Vehe. According to Reish Lakish, we can say that what's the Shavuos? Sinu Kasha. Again, we have two Mahalchim that explain what's going on in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara. According to Reish Lakish, you can explain the Shavuos in the Mishnah of Bilav. I will not eat less than Ekzayis of Nevela, Behin, and a positive. I will eat. And every Shavuos needs a lav Behin. El Rav Yechanan, Bish, Amalav Mishkach Slam. Elahain, Heichi Mishkach Slam. We take a moment to look at Rashi. Rashi explains, where is Rashi? Here we go. At the end of the narrow lines. Why? And Rashi gives us the key. The key is from tomorrow's daf, which we're going to learn. Ein carbon shvua ba elam kemata moitziba lav vehein. The only time there's going to be a carbon shvua is if you articulate the positive and the negative. Techsev lahara lahatif. Timashma davar v'chilufa. You always need to be able to say everything in the positive and the negative. V'haim mefarish loichal chatzi shir nevela mishkach slanami b'shua sha'oichal chatzi shir nevela tilav nishba levatel as mitzvahu. But the problem is according to Rav Yechanan, who says b'shir shalem and it's an Isser Koilel. So how do you have a lavaheim? Says the Gemara, Ela kidirava. Amar Rava teaches Rava Shavuos layoichel ve'achal afar, as we learned in the previous daf. So makes it sure I'm not going to eat, and he eats dirt. Patur, what's lachis patur? But if you're nevela, you're going to be chayiv. Proves the Gemara Amar Amaria Vanana Mitanina Koinem Ishti Nanisliya making one makes an eder. His wife can have any benefit from him. Then Ari Ishta Yasuralahi. It's called an achila. And as much as Nevela Shrefish Katzim Ramasim are forbidden, it has the shame achila. So the kainam, the neder will be chal and his wife will be aser. Says the Gemara, 1 second. What's the raya? Some give the meikar achal v'hadir shtabalei. Over there, what? First, that which is aser, and only later did he make a shvuah. As we turn over to Chav Daled Amud Beis, Chashuvei Achshavei, the classical Achshavei, that you showed that to yourself, this food that you are eating, this forbidden food, shkatzim ramatzim, is called achila, elahacha. But in our case, mi achshavei, did he actually do such? And therefore, maybe to him it was not called achila, and therefore will not be included in the shvuah. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the broader concept of Isser Koilel. Again, Isser Koilel, the concept being, we'll use the example the Gemara gave of Yom Kippur. There's an Isser Nevela, you can't eat Nevela. Comes Yom Kippur is more Koilel, is a larger Isser that's Chal on top of it. Amar Rava, my taima demand Isla Isser Koilel. Asks Rava, what is the reason for one who holds Isser Koilel will be a Chal even on a previous Isser? Mi did have a Isser Ma'isif. It's similar to an Isser Ma'isif. That again, Isser Ma'isif is a similar concept that it adds on to that which is prior Isser. Man de Patar, one who says you're Patar de Leslie, does not hold of Isser Koilel. What does he say about Isser Ma'isif? Kiyamar Isser Ma'isif is what? B'chada chaticha. But b'shtei chaticha is loy amrinan. The simple chilik being, is it one item or is it two items? If it's one item, then, and it's just a larger Isser, that's going to be an Isser Ma'isif. But b'shtei chaticha is, if the new Isser is coming to be more expansive, more inclusive, that's where he argues. That's the fine nuance of a chilik between an Isser Ma'isif, that when there's a higher level Isser versus an Isser Koilel. So Rashi over here, again, and these are fine nuances. Rashi comes along, let's learn a Rashi together. Rashi is about 8 lines into the Rashi. Rashi says, Isser Koilel Kari, Hecha, De'in Isser Acharoin, Ma'isif al Chaticha Klum. Doesn't add on anything to this piece. Avul Marbehu Isser. It adds on something forbidden ala Adam b'dvarim acherim. Kigoin. Nevela b'yom kippurim. D'loi ba la'asrei ela b'achila. U'b'achila kvar asura. The chaticha was asr nachila, and now it's still asr nachila hi. Misham nevela. Nimsa that the Isser Koilel of Yom Kippur shlo yahoisiv aleo Isser acherin klum. Didn't add anything on. Avul riba yisura ala adam. B'Yom Kippur made the person more aser. In what regard? La isra. B'chol eichlan, that everything is aser in the world. And therefore, once it's chal in Yom Kippur on the person, therefore it'll be chal in other chatichos. Whereas in Isser Ma'isif, Rashi continues to explain, is when kishe Isser acharayim Ma'isif al chaticha atzmai. Dover shlayabad, it wasn't priorly aser al Isser Rishain. And this chaticha becomes more, which is prior mutter. Kegoin, chelev al kadosh, aser lecha misham chelev, mutter ligvaya lemizbeach. Then nase noiser, when the carbon is left over, now moisev ala iser that what lemashes mutaris loy denisala hakrav. That's iser moisef. That the item itself, we'll call it the chefsa itself, perhaps you can use the terms chefsa and gavra, is that the person is her koilel, the person has more isurim, or is it the chefsa, the item has more isurim? Continues the Gemara, back to the Gemara, at the end of the 5th line, V'amarav, L'man dis le'isar koilel, one holds of isar koilel, Amar shua shleichal teinim, someone says, shua, I'm not going to eat figs, V'chazra, Amar shua shleichal teinim, then he says again, Ashvu, I'm not going to eat te'inim, figs, v'anavim, and grapes. Miyud chayil anavim, once the shvu is chayil for the secondary item, chayil nami ate'inim. Says the Gemara, shkoyach, pshita. Explains the Gemara, you know what? Amrina, like we saw earlier. Like Yom Kippur, that happens on its own, and not if you're making it. Says the Gemara, Kamash malan, that it would still be chal. Continues the Gemara at the 2 dots. Masiv Rava Breider Rabba. Yesh Eichla Achila Achas V'chayev Aleha arba chatois ve'asham. A Gemara that we've had prior, that one could eat one achila. We had this Gemara in Shabbos, Yavamis, and Michayev 4 chatois and 1 asham. V'asham echad ve'eluim. Tamei shachal chelef v'u noiser min hamikdashim, and it was left over b'yom kippurim. Rameir Amer Avim Ma'aser Shabbos v'yitzia, and you brought out on Shabbos your chayiv. Amru Loi, they said to Rameir, Eino min Hashem. V'misa meshachzor chamish, and if you go according to what you're saying that it can be a separate iser, I'll tell you there are 5. Kon she'amar Shavuos lo'echal tamarim v'chelef migu d'chayla tamarim chayl nami ha'chelef. Says Gemara, Kikatani Isar Ba Me'ela, V'Isar Ba Me'atzmai, Loi Katani. So says the Gemara, what do we see? We see the Isar Ba Me'atzmai, it doesn't work. Yeah, but only Isar Ba Me'ela. Very hektish v'bachar, the Kedushas Merachem. Very hektish v'bachar. Very hektish. What about the Isser of hektish that we said there is an asham, that even though it comes by oneself, that he makes it into hektish? Explains the Gemara, but b'char, we're talking about the Kedushas Merachem, it doesn't come by the owner, rather it comes on its own. Iba Yisei Makikatani Midi de Lesle She'ela. Shvua Disle She'ela Loi Katani. Ay Hari Hektish. Hakamin on Bebechar. Iba Yisei Makikatani Carbon Kavua Carbon Oil of Yared Loi Katani. Ay Yari Tami Shachos Hektish the Carbon Oil of Yared who? Ben Nasi explains the Gemara of Rev Eliezer. He Damar Nasi Mevi Seir. Rav Ashi Amar Kikatani Midi de Chayle Kishir Shavua. The Chayli Apachs Meishir Loi Katani. So we're going through all the different permutations, whether the Yisurim should apply. Ari Hektish, Abin Shava Pruta. Rav Ashi Me'avira Amar Rav Zeira Kikatani Zidainai Kares, Zidainai Lav, Loi Katani. We're only talking about a case of a Zadain of a Kares, not a Zadain of a Lav. Very Ashav the Zidainai Lav Vikatani. Explains the Gemara, no, Bechatos Kamino, only talking about a Chatos. So that's 5 different answers to the Shaila of Rava. We'll pick it up from here. B'siyata Dishmai.